All right, I'm usually the really heavy one, but that role seems to be very well taken care of today. So, heavy, I'm usually the heavy. Heavy is in serious, art tells me I should. Clever. So I'm Ted. I'm a friend of Art's from college. So it's almost 35 years. First I have to say, in Art's presence, that I'm kind of a big picture guy, not a good detail fact guy, which Art doesn't like. Art doesn't like any exaggeration or when you get a little fact wrong. So I just want to acknowledge that we tell a few stories here, but maybe slightly off on some of the details, but the spirit is 100% accurate. Okay. And I should also say that while Art's demand for accuracy can sometimes be a little bit of a pain in the neck, it's also helped me to live to a higher standard, at least when Art's around. So I want to give Jan and her family, friends, just a few glimpses of how good it is to have art in your life. It was 1975 or 76, spring break, and Art and I took a trip down to Nashville. We took the train to New York from Providence. We stayed overnight at Art's apartment, and we borrowed his father's car, which we were going to take down to Tennessee. But before we left New York, Art wanted to show me some of the great sights of New York, and he wanted to take me down to Canal Street to show me the store called the Push Cart, which sold job lots, because he thought I would like it, and there were obviously a lot of good values to be had. It was somewhere around Canal Street, I think, and we got down to the right part of the city, and as my memory serves, we couldn't find the place. We're walking around, going off the main street, down a little street here, a little street there, and we couldn't find the place. It was getting late, and we were really ready to give up. And we turned down this one street, and we turned back to leave the street, and a flyer, a leaflet, fell out of the sky. Plastic bag. A plastic bag, that's right, fell out of the sky, and it was from the Push Cart, and it had the address on it. So that's what we call Beshert. Meant to be. We were meant to be down that street at that time. Sometimes it seems that my entire friendship has been Beshert. He was that it was an unlikely happenstance, but certainly a happy one. Art was studying engineering. I was studying art and religious studies. We didn't have any classes together. Although we did take a poetry class together at one point. But if we hadn't lived on the same hall, directly across the hall from each other, freshman year, I don't know that we would have ever met. But we became good and lasting friends during that first year. We shared a little bit of taste in music, Elton John, Bob Dylan, Judy Collins, but Art's taste veered a little farther afield from mine toward Jethro Tull, the Grateful Dead, which he listened to on his giant Serwin Vegas speakers. Anybody from Brown might remember those. They were very, very good. I was kind of a loner, and Art's room was like the hub of social activity for the hall. Art had grown up in an apartment in Queens. I had grown up in a house in suburban Chicago. He was city smart, I wasn't. In fact, our senior year in college, when we lived with Mark Ryan, who's here tonight, and Michael Katzwitz, we lived in an old house that had been converted into apartments. And Art one day said, "This is the first time I've ever lived in a private house." And I said, "Well, this is the first time I've ever lived in an apartment." So despite all our differences, I think we realized very early on that we shared a set of deeply held values, and that what we shared transcended what made us different. This is kind of odd to say because as long as I've known Art, we don't have a lot of conversations in this area. So I'm glad to do it. And God knows there's no shortage of feeling around here. We learned a lot from hanging around each other. I actually learned that I liked the Grateful Dead, as it happened. We went to a Tull concert at the Providence Civic Center, which I enjoyed very much, even if I didn't become a loyal fan. We traveled together through Europe during our sophomore year, and Art saw me sketching people on the train one day, and he took out a piece of paper, and he carefully drew an amazing likeness, a portrait of the man who was sleeping across the train car from him. And it astounded me because I had never known Art to do anything artistic and it was genuinely a good drawing. And I tell that story every time, for years, when I'm teaching drawing or when I'm talking to friends who say that drawing is out of their capabilities. So here are a few things that I learned from art over the years. When you buy a rug remnant from a guy in a warehouse, and you're going to pay him cash, tell him that before you negotiate the price, because you'll get a better deal. I learned about arbitrage, Giffen goods, 7-layer cake. I learned that when you're ordering pizza, the extra large is not always the best value per square inch. And I learned that sleeping outside is really a great thing to do. I never slept outside until Art and I traveled together that summer in Europe. Which brings me to another example of Beshert that I shared with Art, a second sort of magical experience. That's one of my all-time favorite memories. A few weeks into our grand tour, we arrived by train in Grenoble in the middle of the night. We walked through the deserted streets with our backpacks, looking for a park or someplace safe to sleep. Correct me if I'm wrong. All right, good. Then I've got free rein. A man drove by and he stopped and asked if he could help us. And if my memory's correct, we got in his car and he drove us to a large park, all by dark of night. We unrolled our sleeping bags and spent the night under a giant tree. When we woke, we were covered with drops of white sap that had fallen from the tree during the night. But when we opened our eyes, we were surrounded by the early morning sun shining on Mont Blanc and the Alps all around us. More than 30 years later, that remains one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen. And I have Art to thank for it. There have been many other stories like this. Art making gefilte fish from scratch in his apartment in Hyde Park to bring to my family's Seder, which nobody could believe, although he only did it once, which is more than most people. Art coming to the Shiva for my father daily, cooking kalikas for my mother, my family. All right, I could go on with these, but I won't. The great Art Kufferman travel story is the one that Conrad alluded to, the one that we all know well now. One that took place a few years ago when Art went on a hike to see a beautiful waterfall. It's the story where the ultimate Beshert happens, the story where he met Jan. I don't know Jan that well yet, but what I know about her is that she completely sees the beauty of Art's soul. It's no accident that they met on a hike to somewhere majestic and beautiful. It's there that the best of Art was surely shining, and Jan had the sensitivity and soulfulness to recognize it. Jan, I know from talking with Art over the past few years that it took him a while to fully believe that he had found a woman who was as loving and caring as you. Someone who sees and appreciates all his goodness and wants him to be part of her life forever. Today's a beautiful day, but I'd like to think that it's really like that night Art and I arrived in Grenoble. As happy as we were to be there and to find a comfortable place to sleep, we couldn't imagine what beauty awaited us with the dawn. Today is a beautiful day, a day of Beshert, but I'm quite sure that tomorrow and in the years to come, Art and Jan will again and again awaken to share unimagined beauty and unimagined love as each new day dawns. Bye.